Just a reminder for those of you who just came in, we're going to want to have the Shabbat prayer book, but also there is a song sheet. So if you didn't get one when you came in, now's a great time to pick one up. Wonderful. Thank you. I think that's the train telling us it's time. It's like a shofar, right? Calling out, letting us know what time it is. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
It's
Shalom.
really wonderful to be together. It's wonderful to reach this weekend, this Shabbat, as it starts, as I was just speaking with Anne. It forces us to take deep breaths as we reach this end of busy weeks and whatever type of things that we've been busy with. I invite you just to take a deep breath. Pay attention to how it enters and exits your body with each breath. And we are told that on Shabbat we have an extra soul. Perhaps that big breath that we're taking in that fills us up is our being able to sense that this is a special time, this is a sacred time, this is a time for us to be together and to really focus and be centered. So we'll begin our Shabbat with Hine Ma Tov, which is found on your song sheet.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 How good it is, how good it is, how sweet it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
How good it is for all of us to be together on this day. We continue singing together with the words of Light These Lights.
Oh, hear my prayer, I sing to you. Be gracious to the ones I lights and see the way to you, and let us say Amen. Let us light these lights and see the way to you, and let us say Amen. Oh, hear my prayer, I sing to you. Be gracious to the ones I love, and bless them with goodness and mercy and peace. Oh, hear my prayer to you.
We turn now to page 2 for our candle lighting, and I invite Skip Becker forward to help us with lighting the candles.
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the lights of Shabbat.
Amen.
We continue together with the words of Shalom Aleichem, which you can find in your prayer book on page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Hasharet, Malchei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu l'shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu.
We transition now to page 26 as we prepare for our Chatzi Kaddish. There will be songs that we rejoice and we dance for. The Chatzi Kaddish is hard to dance to. So I'm going to say that this is not a dancing song, but we'll join together on page 26.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi, ve'alma divrach yotev yamlich malchutev, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayedeko bet Yisrael, bagala bagala uv'izman kariv ve'himeru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam lan me'almaya yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbahar v'yitramam v'yitnase v'yithadar v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu Lahela mikol bechata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'himeru Amen.
Please rise in body or spirit as you are able. We continue on page 28.
Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai.
We continue on the top of page 30. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, v'chochma poteach she'arim, uvidvuna mishane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzevaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch alenu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. On page 32, everlasting love. Please join with me. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people, Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibareta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lektecha v'derech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chtavtam al mizuzot beitecha u'visharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם
Adonai Elohechem, Amen. On page 39, we pray together, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. And this is a joyous song, which means dancing is appropriate if you would like.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה Moshe Miriam, Zeilianu ve'amru, Adonai Himloch, Adonai Himloch, Le'olam va'ed.
V'ne'amar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo miyad chazak mimenu. Baruch ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Continue with our words of Hashkivenu on your song sheet.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hashkivenu l'shalom, v'amidenu shomrenu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hashkivenu l'shalom. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms.
On page 44, the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It is a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed. On page 46, if you are able, please rise in body or spirit for our tefillah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agi teilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibur v'Hanorah El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'konei HaKol V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot U'mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem Le'ma'an Shemo Ve'ava Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav LeHoshia Morid HaTal Mechakeh L'chaim B'chesed Mechayei HaKol B'rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'rofei Cholim U'matir Asurim U'mekayem Emunato B'shenei Achar B'chamocha Ba'al Gevurot U'mido Melach Melech Memit U'mechayeh U'matzmiach Yeshua ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. On page 55 at the top, we pray together, may these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Ritzei, Ritzei, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, ve'amcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam, ve'avat kabel, u'teil ratzon tamid, u'teil ratzon tamid, avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yirah navod, she'otecha levadecha b'yirah navod.
On page 58, we acknowledge with thanks that you are Adonai, our God, and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O good one whose mercies never end, O compassionate one whose kindness never fails, we forever put our hope in you. For all these things, O sovereign, let your name be forever praised and blessed. O God, our Redeemer and Helper, let all who live affirm you and praise your name in truth. Blessed are you, Adonai, your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lechodot. On page 61, grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivarech et amo Yisrael, b'shalom.
We now take a moment of silent prayer and meditations of the heart.
continue now with Seder kriyata Torah, which can be found on page 244, page 244. And I invite you to rise if you are able.
In kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'in kemasecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim umemsharcha bechol dor vador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch leolam vaed Adonai hoz le'amo yitin Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai mirushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah Torah Baruch shenatan Torah Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shmo Gadol Adonai iti Umama Shmo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Tiferet V'Hanitzach V'Haod Ki kol b'shamayim uvaretz Ki kol b'shamayim uvaretz Lecha Adonai הממלכה והמתנשא לכל ראש.
You may be seated. For those of you who would like to follow along, our Torah reading can be found, I wrote it down, on page 820 in the Plaut Chumash, 820. Our Torah portion today is Parshat Emor. I'm reading a part that I've not read before, so it was interesting learning a lot of new vocabulary today. I hope you will be comfortable with my translation because some of these words are a little unusual. The part that I will be reading from has to do. We often talk about the animal sacrifices and the different things that the animals have to be in order to be considered perfect enough to be offered as an offering. This is going in a little bit of a different direction, though some of the things are the same, which is to say who the priests are and who the people are who are able to approach and offer up what they call God's food, if you will. And it recognizes that on the one hand, they don't say anyone with a handicap can't do it because the assumption is that if you have any type of a physical handicap, you're not supposed to be able to if it's very obvious. And now they go to the part, well, what about those that are less obvious? Which ones will make it so that you are not able to draw near? Now, you might be thinking, Rabbi, why are you choosing this part to read from? Because it's just as exciting as the one I think I read, was it last week or the week before? Where you look and you say, the Peshat reading of this, the simple reading of this makes you go, But it's still part of our holiness code, and it's there to teach us something. And it's our job to try to find what that lesson is, and I'm going to offer that after we read from this portion. Please join with me in the blessings. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach, Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha'Torah. V'yedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. This might sound familiar. And God spoke to Moses, saying to him, Deber el Aharon lemor. Speak to Aaron the following. Ish mizaracha ledorotam. If there are anyone from your seed throughout the generations, asher yihyeh mum, who has some sort of physical blemish on him, lo yikrav lehakriv lechem Elohav. He may not draw near to offer up bread to God. Ki chol ish asher vo mum lo yikrav. So it's saying, because any person who has within him some blemish is not allowed to draw near. Ish iver, which is a blind person, o piseach, which is someone who is crippled, o harum, someone, okay, so I found a couple different translations of this one. On one, it says someone who has a slit nose. I'm not sure what that is, but I think of like Harry Potter and, right? But actually in another translation, a modern translation, it said pug nose. So in reference to the one that's following after it, I want to say that it means any type of a part of your body that is smaller than it should be. We go with that. Oh, sarua, and that is, there's actually a word for this, someone who has a limb that is too long. O ish asher yihiyevo shaver regel o shaver yad, or if there's a person who has a broken foot or a broken hand, o givan, or has a hunched back, o dak, or is a dwarf, or tuvulal, has cataracts, be'eno, in his eyes. O, where am I going? O garav, which is, or has scabs. I almost skipped a line. O yalefet, or has scurvy. O miruach, or no, miroach ashecha. This was, yes, many different translations of this, or one who has crushed testicles. Kol ish asher vo mum, every person who has a blemish, mi zera aharon, from this seed, from this line of Aaron, hakohen, the priest, lo yigash, they may not come forward, lahakariv et ishe Adonai. That person is not allowed to come forward in order to give this food for God. Mumbo et lechem Elohav, if they have within them this physical disability, this physical handicap, the food that they're giving to God, it's not always in the same order that we would recite it, is lechem Elohav, which is God's lechem, hamotzi lechem, right? The bread, God's bread. Lo yigash lahakriv lechem, he may not go forward and bring the lechem Elohav, God's bread, mikodshe hakadoshim, as far as going to this Holy of Holies, umin hakadoshim yeyachel, and they can't do this on behalf of the people, but ach el haparochet lo yavo, but it's saying to the parochet, which is the linen, lo yavo, he may not come el hamizbeach, to the mizbeach, Lo yigash, he may not come near. Ki mumvo, for it has a blemish within him. Velo yechulal et mikodshai, which is so that he may not profane my holy places. Ki ani Adonai mikodashtam, v'yidaber Moshe el Aharon ve'el banav ve'el kol b'nei Yisrael, which is to say that I, your God, am holy. You shall speak, Moses, these words to Aaron and to his sons and to all of the Israelites. And I think I might have translated or missed a line, because one of the parts that I thought was very important is where it says specifically, you cannot bring the bread, but that doesn't keep you from eating the bread. You can eat the bread. There's a very important distinction. We join together, page 250. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. With the Torah in our midst, we take a moment to remind ourselves that there is not one of us who is without blemish, but also that we think especially of those who are ailing at this time, those in our community, including Penelope June Moyer, Julie Bainbridge, Ruth Hirsch, Maxine Rubin, Nisim Ben Rachel, Christina Lobertini-Burks, Dave Cox, Jim Levinson, Larry Weinberger, Jody Weinberger, Jim Locke, Dick Levinson, Mitchell Quint, Gary Pacernick, Linda Dean Harris, Cicely Nathan, Jerry McDonald, Marty Sacker, and Bob Kahn. Of course, those we name now in our hearts, or perhaps if you'd like to lift up another name as my hand goes across your eyes, please do so. Mishaberach avotenu ve'imotenu, mishivarech ve'irapeh et hacholim. May the one who has blessed and kept our ancestors in every generation continue to bring blessing and healing to all who are in need of healing. Baruch atah Adonai rofei hacholim. Blessed are you, O God, the one who heals those in need of healing.
The words of Mishaberach can be found on the back side of your song sheet.
Yishberach avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Yishberach imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, v'Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well. Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your hope. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. Bless us with the vision for tomorrow. Help us to reach out to those in pain. May the warmth of friendship ease our sorrow. Give us courage, give us faith, show us the way. Mishaberach avotenu, Mishaberach imotenu. Hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well.
At this time, we rise as we lift and dress the Torah.
זאת התורה ששם משה לבני בני ישראל. אבי אדוני ביד משה. יאי לי 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 לי, יאי לי 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 לי, יאי לי 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 לי, יאי לי לי לי. Maybe see.
So I'm thrilled to say that I made copies, but I did not make enough copies of an article that I'm going to pass around and you can share with each other. If anyone would like a copy later, I'm happy to make it for you. I was going to say, Courtney, do you want to try and... Thank you. Appreciate it. So there are these Torah portions that we come across where you say, wow, that's going to be really hard to try not to preach against the text. That's something they teach you not to do in rabbinic school. It's not a great way to make a point. But this is one where we listen to it and we think to ourselves, okay, what are we going to do with this? And I often don't talk about it because there are other things to talk about within this portion, things that I think are more relatable in our lives. But there's an article that I read in 1999 that I kept because it is one that, for me at least, allowed me to find this portion a little bit more palatable to me. And I wanted to look at it together and to see how we respond to this. And does it work? Is there a value that we can find from this? I especially thought of it today just because I know that when we had a funeral this afternoon, the sister of our deceased had made a point to say, for those who are struggling, for those who have anything that keeps them from being able to reach all of their dreams, that it's important that we are compassionate and not judgmental, and look at them as the beautiful people that they are. And with that in mind, I thought this is the right time for me to bring this portion out, just to remind us a little bit about that. The writer of this is Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who has this titled, Blemished People, Unblemished Tools. I like the name to start with, so that's why I read it. It starts by saying that there are lots of things that need to change or have changed or have just started to change. When we look at our Torah, we don't think of it as something that has a timeline, right? It's sort of all around the same time. It's ancient, right? This is our people. But the truth is that some things come a little bit later, some things come a little bit earlier, and the hand of the different people who helped to bring this divine message to us was influenced by a lot of what was happening at the time as well. And before reading this, I just want to share that one of the things that I read is that some of these parts were done at a time when the Israelite people were going from a polytheistic system, not necessarily the Israelites, but the ancient Near East community, were making this sort of transition, and we were bringing through this monotheistic system. And in keeping with much, much earlier texts, there was a tradition of each person who walked into the sacred place, the sanctuary, that was filled as a time of fear, a fear of contaminating or of being in a place, a situation that could be very dangerous. And so all of this happens within this time period, this development of a people it's believed that actually people who had disabilities had been treated better before this time. But again, as things were changing and the religion was beginning to come to fruition and we were understanding our relationship with God, the emphasis on these tools, if you will, changed. So just a little bit of information to start with. When we look at this, you'll notice I have a couple things that are highlighted. And some of those are to point out what I found at least to be some of the more important points of this. When we look at the third paragraph, it says, the Torah speaks about disabilities, reflecting a complex balance of values, priorities, and perceptions. And this is important. On one hand, and we're familiar with most of these because I like these stories, we read them more. On the one hand, many of the biblical leaders themselves suffered from physical handicaps. Jacob was crippled in his walking, Moses was a stutterer, Miriam suffered from leprosy and Isaac from blindness. Saul had bouts of insanity and severe depression. These leaders and many others in the Tanakh and rabbinic literature were able to surmount their disabilities and to lead the Jewish people in exemplary fashion. If you remember, a few weeks ago we were talking about holding different verses of Torah that sometimes don't necessarily embrace the same values. And that's an important point for us to say, that it may say this in this section, but our experience is also telling us about the value of people seen in other sections as well, and their capacity and ability to be great leaders. Now, when we talk about this portion, it's telling us specifically that physical perfection is the measurement by which the performing priest is being judged, right? That's the thing that is being most important. And we're taught that this list, there are 12 different things by which a person is considered to have a mum, some sort of a blemish, and 7 of those are actually the same that go towards the animals that are used for the sacrifice. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that those also are supposed to have this experience of perfection. It tells us right here, all those who suffer from these afflictions are prohibited from offering a sacrifice in the temple. Now, I mentioned that they were able to go in and they were able to eat of the bread. They couldn't offer it on behalf of the people. Why was that significant? Any guesses, since I'm doing all the talking? Why would that matter? The person is not considered impure. If they were impure, they wouldn't be able to be there. This has nothing to do with purity. It has to do with the functionality of the role that they would be playing. And so we look a little bit further down in our sheet, and we see that rabbinics and the rabbinic work that follows after, that there were those like the blind, the deaf, mute, developmentally disabled, who were not allowed to participate as full members of Jewish society, either by functioning as acceptable witnesses in legal proceedings or as members of the minyan in religious services. Now, some of you may have heard over the years that we'd like to talk about an organization outside of Jerusalem that is there because it actively is trying to combat some of these understandings that have come from this. Meaning, for instance, if someone who has some sort of a developmental disability is not required, if you will, to be part of the minyan or required to be a bar bat mitzvah, they don't get to be, right? But within the Reform community and within the more liberal communities, they actually have communities that train these people and celebrate with them to have their bar and bat mitzvahs, because again, that's a value that we hold very dear. So while we look at this, it says, while these prohibitions may have been reasonable in a time when no one could figure out how to educate or communicate with the disabled, the legacy those rules leave remains a tragedy in our day. How do we feel about that? I I think it's a very big statement. Remember how I said sometimes they say not to preach against the text? So he does use text to help defend it, but I think it's an important point. It says, medieval commentators noted that precisely those traits which disqualify a Kohen from performing his duties also disqualified this animal from being sacrificed. Both of them, the sacrifice and the one performing the sacrifice, could not suffer any type of defect. At the same time, anyone, regardless of suffering those defects or not, was certainly welcome to bring a sacrifice to the temple, and it would be accepted by the Kohanim. It would function to bring atonement between the individual and God. This person was not kept out of the community in this respect. They were brought in. They weren't considered, again, impure. In other words, and this is the part that is really significant, it says both the Kohen and the animal function not as representatives of human values and ideals. This is the chidush, but rather as instruments in the temple ritual. Just as you wouldn't use a broken hammer to build a house, the Torah insists that only Kohanim, whose body can represent the typical Israelite by virtue of its lack of any singular or distinctive traits, is a fitting implement for repairing God's relationship with Jewish individuals. I just want us to sit with that for a second. What is this trying to tell us? What is it distinguishing by saying this is only important regarding being an instrument and not our human value? Is it comforting? Does it give us any comfort? You guys are very talkative. I can tell. I haven't asked you a whole lot of questions in the last several weeks, so maybe you're just not used to this. Yeah, Ann? Yeah. Yes. Right? They can be the hammer that you use on the other side of the building if you'd like. Absolutely. 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 Beautifully said. I couldn't say it any better. I think one of the things that I really like about this in particular is that it says distinctive traits, that it's a matter of whether or not you fit into the cookie cutter of looking like the average Israelite. Just because you might have one of these things that they're calling a mum, whatever this is, so my arm is too long, it just makes me easier to find, right? Like, it doesn't impact who I am or how I can exist, but perhaps if you had one person to take a picture of and send down for 30 generations of what we looked like in this year, maybe they wouldn't choose me with my long arm. It's a little bit less, to me it's less personal, and it doesn't take away my worth and my agency, except for using me in that position. I want to go, just to finish this, through Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. It says, Midrash Vayikra Rabbah picks up on this essential insight and makes explicit that no one is disbarred from offering a sacrifice regardless if they have a handicap or disability. To the contrary, and this is the main point, God cherishes those who wrestle with their handicaps and have to make a greater effort to live their lives. Said Rabbi Abba Bar Yudin, whatever blemish God declared invalid on the case of a beast was declared valid in the case of a person. Just as God declared invalid in the case of a beast one that was blind or broken, so God declared the same valid in the case of a person. A broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. In a very real sense, we are all handicapped, all of us disabled. Each of us balances personal weaknesses, inabilities, injuries, working to compensate for them so they don't prevent us from living our lives to our fullest. In this regard, the Midrash and even this Torah portion remind us that only implements, like the hammers, the Kohanim, and the sacrifices, lack blemish, and only in them is a blemish, a disqualification. But for the rest of us, struggling to be decent, loving, and good, blemishes and disabilities are the catalysts that force us to wrestle with our own fears and inadequacies and to grow. Did we get to a place that we can feel like we came to a better conclusion? How are we feeling about that? When I started reading the Torah portion, you didn't think we were going here. But I love this midrash. I think that it does pick up on an essential insight that I, at least, the first several times that I read that portion, could not find. At least I couldn't find the text to say that. My heart said that. But I like that our tradition has that as well. And it's a good lesson for us to be reminded of, not just this week, but all the time. And I hope that we all, in all of our struggles, in all of our seeking to overcome any type of imperfections, know that we as a community, none of us is left out. We're all in this together. Just something to think about for this Shabbat. This evening, we find ourselves still within that period of time of the Omer, that time between the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, when we're supposed to be bringing offerings between Passover and Shavuot. It's also the time that, much like we were just speaking about, we are supposed to be looking inside of ourselves and trying to find specific meaning and purpose as we prepare for the less freedom than being released from Egypt and more to obligation that we receive with the Torah, and if we ourselves are prepared and ready for that. And as we recite the counting of the Omer every night during this time, it is a good opportunity for us to take into consideration our own thoughts and focus on our own personal strengthening of our hearts. So at this time, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat ha'omer, hayom shmona ve'esrim yom shehem arba'im shavuot la'omer. Today is 28 days, which is 4 weeks of the Omer. At this time, I invite, if you are able, to rise as we return our Torah to the Ark.
It's chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomecha meusha deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom Ashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadish Yameinu Chadish Yameinu Kekedem. We continue with the words of Elenu, which can be found on page 282.
Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us. We are in a period of aninut for William Rossi, a period of Shiva for Deborah Seidel and Rosalind Moss, a period of Shloshim for Shirley Gilbert, Fred Weber, and Janice Davies May. We also remember those who have died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own, as we acknowledge the yard sites for Henry Bader, Margaret Becker, Albert Becker Sr., Davida Block, Avron Burt, Anna B. Cohen, Vern R. Cox, Olive Margolis Frankel, Sophia Friesom, Frida Gindi, Libby G. Golden, Minnie Goldflies, Jerome A. Goldswig, Shirley Greenfield, Florence Kahn Hyman, Minnie Holtz, Felix Jacobs, Anna Katz, Aaron Roth Klein, or Anna Katz, Aaron Roth Klein, Celia Knoll, Bennett A. Laderman, Maurice M. Linder, Morris Meyerson, Philip D. Mayman, Rosalind D. Malavani, David Office, Samuel Peel, Corinne Rich, Ralph Rickenbach, Julius Roman, Rezi Roman, Milton S. Ross, Simon S. Roth, Esther Sacker, Corinna Dagan Shapiro, Max Schulman, Richard Tannenbaum, Gertrude Tenbosch, Tilly Weinberger, Joseph Weinreich, Charles Weprin, and Laverne D. Zimmerman. If there are other names to be mentioned or perhaps pronounced more correctly, I invite you again to please call those out as my hand goes across the room. I invite all who are remembering or who are mourning to please rise first. And now we as a community rise together to recite the words of Kaddish, which may be found on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, ve'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudsha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim Elenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, huya asei shalom, Elenu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories always and only be for a blessing. Amen.
You may be seated. We will conclude our service today singing together the words of Adon Olam, which you can find on page 321.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra v'nasav v'chefzo kol azai melech shemo nivra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levato yimloch nora ve'hu
V'hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. This is the day that God has created. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And in just a moment, we will go into the hallway for our Kiddush and Motzi. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.